Okay, welcome back, everybody. As Carly said, our second and final panel is made up of I think, a very diverse set of SBIR and STTR practitioners who will provide insights into how these programs work in the real world and also provide some perspective on what they believe the program needs to expand participation and further improve outcomes. Some quick introductions. To my immediate left, our panel moderator is Samm Gillard, who is co-founder of the BATT Coalition, which is a collection of innovative companies dedicated to increasing domestic production of raw materials and components for electric batteries. Samm is a former Department of Energy official who worked in the Vehicle Technologies Office and the Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains Office, where among his many duties, he helped manage SBIR projects. Samm is also a former U.S. Army sergeant who supported battery supply chain efforts for the Defense Logistics Agency in his military career. Next to Samm is Christopher Hemmelgarn. Chris is Chief Technology Officer of CRG Defense in Miamisburg, Ohio, which specializes in additive manufacturing and electric propulsion systems for drones, ground vehicles, unmanned underwater vehicles, and so much more. You guys are screwing up my order, but that's okay. Sorry. Martin. Martin's Chief Operating Officer of Xerion Advanced Battery Corporation in Dayton, Ohio, a global leader in nanotechnology and material sciences for lithium-ion batteries that last longer, are less expensive, have a much reduced carbon footprint. I know that's not all that you do. Martin has also had a long career working with other businesses ranging from PocketScript, which provides electronic prescription solutions for the healthcare industry, and also spent quite a bit of time at Alcoa. Next to Martin, welcome Kate Hudson, who is Deputy Vice President and Counsel at the Association of American Universities, which represents, I think I'm getting this right, 71 research universities. She oversees intellectual property, technology transfer, export controls, of course, SBIR and STTR. She's also a former counsel at the Government Accountability Office. And next to her is Christopher Lang, Vice President of Energy Technologies at Physical Sciences Incorporated in Andover, Massachusetts. Chris is responsible for multiple research projects that have resulted in the development and demonstration of technologies for use in lithium-ion batteries to meet energy storage and range requirements for DoD, NASA, and other agencies. And last but not least, Dr. Patrick Sullivan is CEO and founder of OCEANIT in Houston, but also, as we heard, in Ohio. They employ 200 scientists, engineers, and other professionals who have created cutting-edge innovations in aerospace, energy, biophotonics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and more. And without further ado, Samm, I'll hand it over to you and look forward to the discussion.
To me, SBIR and STTR are the most efficient use of government R&D that I ever managed. I can think of a number of projects that started with phase ones for $150K that are now, multi-billion-dollar companies, right? So, this is a great opportunity for investment in the United States, and it really makes a great opportunity for where the United States excels. We, as a country, I think, do innovation very, very well, and is still the area where we outpace China in a lot of ways, is that creative spark that I think SBIR is uniquely qualified to be able to. Better? Great. All right. So yes, as I mentioned, SBIR, most efficient use of government money I ever managed in my time at DOE and DoD. I think ultimately this is it's a program that I feel very passionately about, just because largely I've seen a lot of economic success, and I've also seen creative ways to solve problems for the warfighter and then our national defense. So I guess with that, I'll pass a few questions over to the panel. So the first question, I'd love to just kind of let you all have a few minutes to talk about your company and then the role that SBIR has played in getting you from inception to where you are today. Start with you, Chris.
All right. Push the button. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Right, and if I talk too long, you can nudge me.
All right.
I like talking about these stories. Our team's done some amazing things over the years. And my goal today is to share some of those success stories that our team's achieved through use of the SBIR program. Okay, so sounds like slides are not working, so I'm going to wing this a little bit. We'll see how it goes. CRG Defense. Many of you may not recognize that name because it's a new name for our organization. We just rebranded the organization, formerly known as Cornerstone Research Group. We were founded in 1997 by Dr. Patrick Hood in Dayton, Ohio, with a focus on supporting defense and supporting the warfighter. He won his first SBIR program. His office was in the basement of his house. His desk was a door on a wooden tripod legs, and we've grown it ever since. He did that by bringing in top talent who's extremely passionate about research and creating new things and innovating and creating an environment that encourages that and that supports that also supports risk-taking. So as an organization, we've grown quite a bit. We're an enterprise now. We employ a spin-off business model. We do that for a number of reasons because we've built and optimized an innovation engine that is very efficient and very effective at innovating rapidly and delivering solutions to the warfighter. Now, our enterprise, with all the organizations included, is over 180 employees and growing rapidly. And in roughly the 2019 timeframe is where we began to hit the knee in the curve of growth. And so we have spin-off businesses that are growing extremely fast. Okay. In terms of the spin-off model, why do we do that? We have the innovation engine. It takes a lot to build an engine that can innovate effectively. You want to protect it. So we allow early stage development to occur in the innovation engine. So this is so early stage where venture capital is not interested. This is the type of research that SBIR was meant for. This is where the disruptive solutions come from that really change how we support the warfighter and the capabilities that we can deliver to the warfighter. I'm guessing you get a sense we do focus heavily on the warfighter. So that model then lets us, as the tech matures, spin it out into new companies. So we kick products, matured products, into new companies that allows us to raise capital. And we work closely with angel investors and venture capital folks, and we enjoy those relationships. And it's helped us to scale those businesses. So now we have, just to share a couple examples real quick, we have a spinoff called SpinTech Holdings with business units called Smart Tooling and Hawthorne Composites. This is a business that was built off of a technology from a Air Force SBIR, Phase 1 and Phase 2, that started back in 2004. Subsequent to that, we had over $20 million of commercial R&D funding poured into maturing this technology before it was ever at a point where it could be used as a product and sold to anybody. That's where we spun off the business and started bringing in outside investment. That technology and that organization has now grown to doing over 20 million in revenue this year. They're forecasting over 50 million next year. They're growing extremely rapidly. They are part of the Collaborative Combat Aircraft Program. They're embedded in the Replicator program. Their technologies are being used to manufacture the landing legs on the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and 40 other aerospace, commercial, and defense applications. Very successful organization that we expect to exit in the next year, okay? So that's one. I have a very long list. I won't go through all of them. How much more time do I have?
Well, the panel is an hour, so. But yeah.
Yeah, so if anybody's interested in learning more about how we do things, why we do things the way we do, happy to sit down and talk to you and explain how we transition tech, why we use the spin-off model, how we make it work for us, and how we make it work for the warfighter.
Great. Marty?
All right, so not like CRG. We're a recipient of a SBIR back in 2018, and we were about 15 employees at that time and had raised maybe $10 million in funds. We were given that phase one, and that phase one has turned into subsequent phase twos and phase two pluses, so we've raised about $3 million from that program. That was given to us for battery manufacturing using a very different manufacturing process. We do not make a lithium-ion battery electrode the same way everyone else does. We electroplate it in a molten salt bath at low temperature. It's a very unique process, and it's a one-step process. We go right from the raw material that's used to make the battery into the electrode. There's about 14 steps for everyone else that does this. And there's a lot of purification, there's a lot of energy use. Using that electroplating process in one step, we were intending to use it for the CWB. Most of this has been through the DOD. And in doing that process, when you make an electrode in that kind of a process, you always have a byproduct that's created. And the byproduct that we were creating when we did this was pure cobalt metal. So about 2 years ago, we focused in on the idea of, well, why don't we just use this process to refine minerals? So we were able to produce a system that could produce 5 tons of cobalt metal on a very small unit, and we're in the process of building a 50-ton cobalt processing unit that could be done in the United States because of the environmental issues that are associated with the other processes that we're not using. So that's interesting for cobalt, but what this brought to us, and we believe it's why we received an SBIR last week for gallium refinement. And for those of you that don't know what gallium is, it's very instrumental in AI chips and other power electronics. China has restricted the import of that material today, along with a number of other materials. So we've recently received an SBIR for the refinement of gallium, and we believe we'll be going to phase 2 fairly quickly because that process that we've developed is a very unique process for refining almost any metal. We believe we can refine most of the elements on the critical minerals list. And we're in the process of doing that. So uses very little water, if any. It's very low temperature, and it's environmentally permittable very quickly. We actually believe this is a process that could actually make us a significant exporter of critical minerals in the future.
Thanks, Marty.
I'm just the interloper here, so I will defer to my fellow panelists, not a practitioner.
Sorry, okay. First, thank you all for being here today and being at the event throughout the 2 days. I'm Christopher Lang from Physical Sciences. We are a 100% employee-owned small business, 50 years plus. Due to our structure, we can't take any outside investment. And so what I'm really going to talk to you about is how we've started from technology that, yes, we use the SBIR program to develop, but how we're investing in that to continue to grow it. And that's through my group. So we had developed a number of battery technologies, and we saw within one of our business areas that we had a problem. We couldn't get enough flight time. So we used some of that technology developed through an SBIR to develop a battery that could enhance the flight time. And we saw that there was a gap, a need to do that. And so PSI invested in the facility to manufacture cells and ultimately full batteries and stood up a facility in 2019. Fast forward to today, and again, using technologies we've developed, we're supporting multiple programs of record for the Navy, including the Barracuda system and the Hammerhead encapsulated effector. And we're seeing growth and demand for those, and we're domestically producing solutions, full battery solutions. In the next year, we're anticipating that the systems we need to deliver are going to increase in volume by 3 to 4x. And so we have an agreement to go out and get a larger facility in Massachusetts. It's a multi-million-dollar investment. It's a 10-year lease investment that we're making to put products in warfighters' hands that service their needs. And we continue to do that through innovation, through rapid prototyping and scale to meet the needs. And not only in this area, but in the areas of radiation detection and high-temperature composites, we're making those investments to take these technologies and get them out and get them used as quickly as possible. And happy to talk through those examples and how that process takes time and effort that we need to continue to invest in. So thank you.
Hi, can you hear? So I'm Patrick Sullivan, the CEO and founder of OCEANIT. And for those that don't know, we call ourselves a mine-to-market company. So we do fundamental science, drive it to market, and scale up products. We're in aerospace, energy, and life sciences. I started this actually in '85 with about $100. Got my PhD in engineering, and I was too impatient to teach at a university, so we started solving problems. And I think we've done several private equity finance spin-outs of some of the companies, but we've learned a lot in the process of what it really takes to go to market. So I thought I'd give an example. So in the early '80s, we started work on an idea around industrial nanotechnology and whether we could engineer surfaces for performance, for all kinds of things. And then with the if you remember, there was a movie called Deepwater Horizon with Mark Wahlberg. So that was a failure of cement and steel. And so we were asked by Shell, actually, if we could increase the bond strength between those two things, which they had been working on for 20 years with very poor performance. So we increased the bond strength by 100%. On little samples in the lab, of course. And then they said, well, can you do bigger samples? And I said, well, what do you have in mind? They said 3,000 feet in the Marcellus in Pennsylvania. So we stood that up in 3 months, and the results were so good, they didn't want to talk to us about it till they checked the results about 10 times. And then they said the real problem was the Gulf of Mexico. So we stood up a facility in Houston to produce treated steel casing for the Gulf with a joint venture with Shell, BP, and Chevron. All that was done in 18 months. And that was in the Perdido well, which is a really deep, aggressive well. And that was kind of an interesting problem, but what happened was the ability to engineer a surface. We discovered we could also improve the performance of things like heat exchangers and processing facilities. And it turns out every power plant on the planet has a heat exchanger. And so we did a test in a seawater system, and they used to clean it every 3 months, and they didn't clean it for 6 years. And so that was an interesting outcome. We just delivered last week, actually a couple weeks ago, about 500 treated heat exchangers for Exxon in Baytown, but they've got 50,000 for us to do. But then the week after that, we had a different version of an engineered surface. We treated part of the Teddy Roosevelt, which was in San Diego. And then last week, we had a group in Guam. We partnered up with Lockheed to treat the F-35 laydown in the Indo-Pacific to manage corrosion. So what's interesting is all this started with an SBIR with the Navy. And what sounded like an esoteric question, nanotechnology. Back then, I think MIT had a ketchup bottle. You could pour it out quickly, and it was carbon nanotubes. Nobody had thought of industrial nano as a specialty area. But then we pivoted to energy, and then we pivoted back to defense. And that's kind of realistically how this kind of stuff works. It's not a straight line. You're going from a science to really understand where the right fit is in a market. It takes a lot of work.
Great. Thank you all for the introductions to your company and your story with SBIR. You know, one of the things that I found interesting between DoD and DOE when I was working with both SBIR portfolios is sort of the way that it's deployed as a program manager the goals are inherently different, right? DoD is looking to build a capability that ultimately it can benefit from. In DOE, it was, okay, let's spur innovation in commercialization. So there's a lot more VC work that I did on the DOE side. But with respect to DoD, can you all talk a minute about your experiences with raising money and any differences with respect to a DoD audience or a DoD market, and why you decided to either not raise money or raise money in a particular instance?
Well, speaking about Department of Energy and working with all the big energy companies, since we work with Department of Defense or Department of War, depending on what day it is, but for Department of Energy, we started doing this thing called corporate co-development. So we own the IP, but they put up the capital. It turns out the energy companies have abundant capital. Now, this is directly with the energy companies. This is Exxon, Chevron, Shell, Eni, Aramco. And it's interesting because they don't have access to technology. I mean, they work with the Halliburton, Schlumberger's, Baker Hughes, kind of like the way Department of Defense works with Lockheed, Raytheon, Boeing, and others. But it turns out they don't really get what they need. And so we found that we have the technology. And early on, I think with Chevron, they were trying to get us to work with a venture capitalist, a Chevron Ventures. And then a guy that worked for the CEO in a meeting in Houston walked over and asked the venture capitalist to leave the room. And I thought that was interesting. And he said, they're becoming a distraction. We have the treasury. We actually got all the money we need. Let's focus on the problem. And it turns out it was really interesting because they need the end product. They don't necessarily want to own the IP. So we actually created a methodology, which we call corporate co-development, and we do it with the big energy companies, and it's actually worked quite well. And it's enabled us to go fast. So they'll put up capital for the factory, but they need a certain, preference on access to products coming out of the system.
Great.
Yeah, so the funding we received from the DoD was from the DLA, and it was mostly research space, which we tried to get DOE money in terms of all of the BIL stuff that came out in the past and in the IRA, and we didn't get any of that. What helped us with our situation was the fact that we developed this relationship with the DLA, and we firmly believe that we would not have probably gotten this gallium refinement SBIR without that relationship that we've developed over that 5 to 6 year period.
Okay, so for our organization and our spinoff businesses, we have to work to mature the tech to a certain point. That takes quite a bit of time and effort to do. Oftentimes, it's not just one phase 1 or one phase 2 SBIR that gets us across the finish line. It could be 5, it could be 10. It depends on the maturity levels, the complexity of the technologies that we're working on. At those stages, venture capital is not interested. You don't have a proven tech. You don't have a proven transition path. You don't have a proven market. And these are all things that we have to develop as we work through our programs. Once you finally have proven that you can do it, you've proven that it works, maybe if it's an advanced material, you start getting qualified material properties. But ultimately, you have to show a customer, not in the research labs, a customer on the user side from a program office that's going to buy that technology. That's when the venture capital folks become interested for us. Because you got to think about transition timelines. Their interest is, let's say, 3 to 7 years, they want to exit. They want to grow the business and they want to exit. That doesn't align with the early stage development work that the SBIR is so good at funding. So the key is time it properly, engage them with the right maturity level, and they do bring an important element to the ecosystem to help infuse the capital needed to scale these products when they reach the right level of maturity.
Yeah, I think the other aspect of that I call the Angry Birds problem, which is that the expectation for ROI for a lot of VC groups is based in software, right? You were all hard tech companies. The horizon's 1985 2000, these are long horizons for developing hard tech, and the ROI, it just moves slower. So anyway, I think that's one of the other challenges I've noticed.
The other thing is that VCs don't take technology risk. We look at three kinds of risks: technology, execution, and market. Roughly half of the risk is market risk, too early or too late. That's where venture money can help mitigate it. But if you're not in one of the regions where there's a lot of venture capital, then you're in trouble. And what we end up doing is we do a risk-adjusted portfolio. So when the market's right, we can go to market at speed, but the market will be there when it's there. And that includes defense, the markets go up and down, energy, the markets go up and down. Same thing with healthcare. And so that's given us the ability to do it. It's taking the idea of finance and innovating it, and the way we do it is around a risk-adjusted portfolio.
Yep, great points. So my next question is for Kate. I'm going to switch gears a little bit to talk about STTRs and how universities work with STTR, the STTR program. The proposed legislation would cut STTR funding by a lot, more than 500 awards in a year. What would that do, obviously, to universities? And maybe can you expand on that, and how do university PIs see STTR funding relative to just normal research funding they're getting from, say, an NSF, a DOE applied program? Is there a different approach that they typically take in that? We're following this down. Yeah.
There we go, sorry. I wanted to thank the organizers and the sponsors today for allowing me to be the interloper here to talk about STTR. I have loved hearing the gospel of SBIR this morning that we have had, and I concur and heartily amen to all of that. If I can add on STTR in specific, I hope we do not forget that STTR is an integral part of the execution, the effectiveness of this program overall. Cuts to STTR will dramatically impact and effectively sever that formal collaborative arrangement between universities and their local communities. It's really highly ironic to me at a time when we are really hearing about focusing more innovation and redistribution geographically to more rural and economically depressed areas, that we are hearing about cuts to STTR, which in fact provide a really interesting and unique mechanism in those communities. Hearing directly from the research universities that I represent in 31 states, many of them are not on the coast, many of them are not in major metropolitan areas. A lot of them are land grants and publics. And I only represent 71, and there's a way more than that in this country. And hearing directly from them, STTR is a gateway for your local community, for local innovation, for place-based innovation, because many times in those communities, the universities are the sole access point to expertise, to equipment, to infrastructure, right? All of those heavy pieces that new entrants to SBIR and STTR would need, right? New firms. From the approach inside the university itself, STTR also provides a really unique context for that academia, private sector back and forth. The allowance of dual hatting for researchers themselves and faculty members, as well as utilization of graduate students, not only allows people to, very top minds, to pursue both paths, both scratch the entrepreneurship itch, but also maintain that federally funded research and workforce training that they provide to that next generation of folks that the private sector wants to hire. Allowing that back and forth is a really unique mechanism that doesn't exist anywhere else in the federal government. And cuts to that is really going to impact that in a way that I don't think people realize just how detrimental that will be. Access to STTR and adopting that approach as PIs helps train your future workforce. So if STTR is impacted to the level where it just effectively disappears, or there are too many impediments for either universities or private sector to work together under STTR, as some of the requirements that have been on the table are sounding, the disappearance of STTR those are first order, secondary, and tertiary effects that you're just going to see down the line, and much more macro effects than necessarily what we're talking about today, especially right now when universities are, I hate to say it, fighting for our lives in terms of research funding. This will impact your workforce that you will want to hire domestically here in the United States. And so any impacts to programs that foster that is going to be highly, highly detrimental to the entire innovation ecosystem itself. And STTR being a hugely impactful program specifically for rural, non-metropolitan areas, land grant schools, agriculture extension. Those are exactly the kinds of things that will suffer the most from changes like this.
Great.
I thought I'd just add to that, too. We work with about 70 different universities, and they're invaluable to really get the work done. That's across the whole country. And without them, we couldn't do what we do.
Yeah, the effectiveness per R&D dollar, like I said earlier, I think between both SBIR and STTR it always astounded me, right? Where I'd be like, this is a $200K grant, and you're out punching some, $1 to $2 million, awards with larger companies. So I can definitely second that, and in both my experience with SBIR and STTR. Switching gears a little bit more, let's talk about China. Because, in many ways, it's the elephant in the room, innovation, scale up, how we as a country can compete. I think ultimately, for those that don't know much about the BATT Coalition, our guiding principle is how do we move the battery supply chain away from China. And so I spent a lot of my time thinking about what are the tools that we can have in the United States to help us compete. To me, SBIR is a perfect example of American exceptionalism, things that we are continually very good at. Can you talk about any of your experience in engaging with China or Chinese partners, the evolution of that over time, the worry about IP contamination, anything with respect to how we in the United States can have a better balance of this exact relationship, because it is challenging. How much China is too much China? So I guess open-ended question there. How would you answer that question?
Want me to go?
Jared, go for it.
All right. So for our organization, it's pretty straightforward. We're a defense contractor, so we're not allowed to engage. It's pretty simple for us. Whereas we have secure facilities, we have secure IT systems, most of our staff have security clearances. We have to be very careful with the information that we have in our organization and the type of work we do. So engaging foreign countries like China is something we just cannot do. And we have all the systems in place to ensure the sensitive defense information is properly protected.
Great.
So one of the things back in 2015, you couldn't find scientists that had the battery knowledge that we needed. So we did hire people as foreign nationalists from China to help us move this process along and develop it. So this look back is a real issue for us in terms of how we'll handle that. As far as the new refining is concerned, we are totally separating the two companies. And we've got the battery division, and then we have the refinement division. So we will, in the future, separate those two as a defense contractor.
I guess I would just like to echo what Cornerstone said, that as a defense contractor, it's really not an option. We have a number of systems, but you really have to wonder about, as you're looking at new candidates and new talent, and just, are you going to look at their papers that they may have cross-wrote with somebody who then maybe writes with somebody else, who maybe not even direct. So it's just a concern you have to think about as an organization and what talent you bring in. And so I think that's unfortunate that you're even considering that when you're thinking about who you might bring in.
I think the issue is relatively new in the bigger picture because there was a time when a lot of universities were flooded with Chinese students, and that was encouraged. I think today, for any companies that do work with Department of Defense, because of CMMC and security requirements and facility security and everything, it doesn't work. It's a non-issue. But I think if there were say a conflict, the companies that would really produce the edge for the U.S. are these kinds of companies, SBIR companies. It's the human capital and the grit that these companies all actually live on a daily basis to make it happen is what's going to be needed to build things, because you don't have a 10-year plumbing process. You just got to make something happen. You see this going on in Ukraine right now. You take all the processes and you've got to throw it out the window and get real to make things now and make things work. And that's really what these companies do. I think SBIR companies bring a significant amount of grit and drive to their business. And the ones that are multiple award winners are the best of class. They've had to compete and compete and compete. So this is a fiercely competitive business for the best ideas. And so what you've got with the SBIR program and multiple award winners is the best of the best. And the idea that's being proposed in the Innovate Act that you would eliminate these companies makes no sense. It's kind of like saying take the winningest football team in high school in the state and eliminate them because they win too much. Let's lower the bar. It doesn't make any sense. You want to encourage these companies to continue to compete because it produces the best people, the best ideas, the best processes, and that's really what this does. And that is what the U.S. needs to keep our country safe with all the issues going on in the Indo-Pacific, for example. This is how it's going to win. We're going to win is with these companies.
And to your point, right, as a former program manager, I believe about 10% we ultimately selected from proposal to projects. And, you know, in general, we considered how many times did I fund this company in the last few years, all of these things. And yes, if you are funding a company that has received multiple awards, there is a process of, okay, like, do you want to fund this company again? Or what is unique about what you just funded, right? I mean, it's a whole process. And the way the Innovate Act is written takes a lot of power out of the program manager's hands to make those judgment calls, where I think ultimately, you know, they're very well suited to make and understand their programs because they live it on the ground every day. The next question I have is about workforce. And can you talk a little bit about what the role of SBIR and STTR has made in creating the workforce of your future, both from, I guess, I'll start with you, Kate, from a university perspective, and then from an industry perspective as well.
Apologies, I'm not used to having to press a button. So our STTR and SBIR projects directly support graduate students, postdocs, you know, early career engineers. And after those projects have matured, many of those students stay locally or they develop into many of the gentlemen sitting here at the panel today, right? And so it's not just simply a transaction of giving, you know, of providing the government seed fund to an entity. It is part of that overall innovation ecosystem with workforce. In the Army, my husband's active duty Army, but they have a phrase called "it's a self-licking ice cream cone." And I think that's kind of apt. It's a virtuous cycle that continues. And given that collaboration, not just in STTR, but in SBIR as well, and bringing in that new talent, developing early stage talent and maturing that talent through workforce, they just build and foster so much of exactly the types of innovation that the US needs. We are not going to be able to get fundamental research discoveries out of the research lab without these kinds of programs and the development of our workforce through these programs. So anything to foster that plays into those larger macroeconomic issues. We already have too few STEM PhDs in the United States. We need more, and so anything that can add to that and amplify it and show a career pathway that is not just academia, no offense to my colleagues, but academia is not for everyone, but to show viable, good jobs, financially secure jobs that can lead people through a dedicated, matured STEM career. All of those things play into the United States economy as a whole. And so SBIR and STTR actually punch well above their weight in that return on workforce as well.
Great. So I've seen it in so many ways. So one thing we say is no one works on a project alone. So you're bringing multiple people together. And then one of the other things I say is we have a diverse company. I find some of my best ideas from watching a presentation that has nothing to do with what I do. So one, you're going to create new solutions, but we've extended it further. You have co-ops and internships, so you have your next generation. We bring in we're adding skilled jobs, high-tech jobs to develop products to help move that forward. And then you're bringing in, say, high school students. You're bringing in people in the summer. And we see them come around. Some of them we see go on and, become teachers in other professions, but they get exposed to this, and they get exposed to an environment of growth, not just a grocery store. And I worked in a grocery store in college, and it's a great job. It's fine. But it's a different thing to show people that they could grow something in your community. You can grow something. I've gone into high schools and said that. So,
when it comes to workforce, we actually do a lot. We've got a pretty good intern program. We've had about 800 over the years, undergraduate and college kids. But I spent a lot of time trying to find talented young PhDs graduating out of universities, and I go out to universities and try to find these kids, or young people, as I'm getting older. And but about maybe twice a year, we have this talk with these new PhDs, and we run almost like a boot camp with these young people. And I have this talk that says basically, we're proud of you, your mom's proud of you, but now nobody cares. What are you going to do to think about a new problem? Because the most important skill set is the ability to think. It's not the field. The fields are changing way too fast. And we actually do a thing called transdisciplinary thinking. We put them in different fields. And we find one or two outcomes. Either they love it or they're terrified. And if they're terrified, we recommend a couple ideas where they could go. But the ones that love it are awesome, and they're fierce competitors, and they think on their feet. And so we regularly do this. And when we find those fits, they're really, we call them techno warriors. For those that are interested, I wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Intellectual Anarchy. It's not anarchy, but it kind of maps out how we think it's science applied to business. So in some ways, it's, Alfred Sloan wrote a book several years ago, My Years at General Motors. It's applying engineering and science to building a multi-conglomerate. What we did was apply science to business. But recruiting is a really big deal. And so I'm looking at several universities right now where they've got graduates, normally in physics and engineering, and where we could find the right fit. Because right now they can't go to universities. A lot of universities aren't hiring. They're not going to national labs. So for us, it's an opportunity. And so we're out recruiting. And again, we work with about 70 different universities. And so I'm visiting a lot of campuses. And when we work with some of the labs too, with these STTR programs and others, I'm looking at the grad students, right? And the professors, I'm looking for the right fit, because the ones that do this that are good are really awesome. And that's what we're looking for, is the fit.
All right, so for our organization, we were built from the beginning with a focus on innovation. And to do that successfully, we needed to bring in and attract the best talent, those with the greatest passion to pursue those areas that they care most about. And that's how our company has operated from the beginning. So what SBIR does, or what SBIR does for us, is allow for us to bring these top talent in and give them the freedom to pursue the opportunities that they are most passionate about. That allows us as an organization to grow in lots of different directions, create lots of opportunity for those folks, and retain that talent. So for us, the SBIR program has allowed us to build an innovative ecosystem where people want to be there, people want to come to the organization. We're bringing top talent in from across the country now because of the type of work we allow our folks to do, because of the freedom that SBIR offers them and the opportunity to not just pursue their passion, but grow their career. So for us, it really helps us to attract and retain top talent as part of a highly innovative organization.
Great. So this will be my last question. This will be my favorite question as well as a fellow engineer to many of you. You know, blue sky this with us for a minute. What can be improved with the SBIR program? As a practitioner, what are the things that you think are missing that would be beneficial to you as a company? So we have about 2 minutes per respondent.
I can go first. I mean, you know, it's an expensive process. Even the phase one. I mean, the phase one we submitted for gallium was 35 pages long. So it's arduous and it's slow. It takes a long time to get to phase two and then the phase 3 pluses. I mean, we were at it for 6 years and we got about $3 million from the first one from the DLA. We hope it's going to move faster with gallium, but that would be the biggest thing for us is the requirements. I mean, we have 20 PhDs that work for us, so we're a small organization, but we have a lot of horsepower, and innovation is a key for us as well. And we do bring in a lot of interns and do that work to do that. But it takes a special skill set to write these. And that would be my position.
Sure.
So on my Christmas list for this would be, and I think this also goes back to your question on China and dealing with compliance issues. We've got to strike the right balance after we get through, hopefully, this clean reauthorization for reform. Universities and entities need transparent criteria, an appeals process that actually works, and human review. We cannot just devote entire review tracks to AI. We have got to involve human review, which is part of the proposals right now. But also simplified solicitation tracks, cost sharing for compliance, university partnership incentives. We need to bolster those portions. Mentor, protege, and incubator links. A lot of entities, like Dr. Sullivan mentioned, are already doing this, but I think we can really formalize some of that and make that a greater incentive. And then more data and transparency from the agencies themselves. So that is my laundry list.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think Dr. Fieldman brought up a very good point that the SBIR program actually functions quite well, but there's a capital problem. And part of the Department of Defense, it's pretty straightforward. There's a multi-year process for planning that's out of step with reality. So there's a need for acquisition reform. And one way to do that, which would connect SBIR from a policy standpoint, is take, for example, 1% of acquisition dollars allocated against SBIR phase 2s that have actually succeeded and make it available for example, combatant commands. You've got geographic combatant commands that need to get technology now. They need it right away. And if they could go to these companies and say, I've got acquisition dollars, you've demonstrated a technology, can you get me 10 of those in 6 months? That would be a great use of capital, and what it would do is it would challenge the current franchise holders that are basically built around a process. What I'm really referring to is the big defense contractors that are really process-driven in a process built just after World War II, and not a whole lot has changed. But the way the world is today, being closer to the end user is where most businesses focus. And the end user, for example, if you've got a combatant command, they're purple, meaning they don't, multiple services at the same time. They're executing a plan. They need technology to fill in those gaps, and they need it now. So it would be a relatively straightforward fix from a policy standpoint to take 1% of acquisition dollars and say, look, anybody that's gone through this program, we're going to make this money available to the combatant commands. You can choose from a list and tell them what you need. Because they've been vetted, each one of these companies is CMMC compliant. They don't have Chinese influence and money. And they'll work their hearts out to deliver. And that's what's really needed. And so this kind of acquisition reform actually would be a really good idea and a positive thing. I think further tweaking with the program, you can do little things on the margin, but there's not a whole lot to tweak. I think we've got universities tied to companies. It's very competitive. It's based on merit. And yeah, people can complain they don't like the ref was mean to them, or somebody didn't like the call that day. That's always going to be a problem, but that's life. I think companies got to learn, and it's open to anybody. They don't even have to have an education. If you can write a persuasive idea, you can take a crack at it. But winning a phase one, it's like 1 in 10. So what I tell young recruits and PhDs, write 10, lose 9, win 1, now you're at par. And you got to get over yourself because you got to learn to compete. And if you can't compete, you won't be successful. So competition is actually how we create the best of breed. And that's one of the best parts about the program. But I think an improvement would be to deal with a capital problem because it is not going to be solved by venture capital. They're not built for that. They just basically buy market risk and go to an exit. And by the way, I would argue that there's more Chinese influence in venture capital by far than any of these companies. But nobody wants to look there. But I think that's a place one should look.
Thank you.
Since the obvious answer isn't make it permanent, I think that's what a lot of people would look at. We've heard a lot of things. I think at the end of the day, we invite competition. We invite a merit-based process that we have. We've heard a lot of ways in which it's working. And so if you extended it and made it more permanent, you would open it for more people. Obviously, there are some good things. The process can be really arduous. But you're starting to see program managers, we heard, who understand also that it can help them solve the problem and get through the gap of the palming. And so whatever you can do to support them to have the capital to keep doing that. And so, an arbitrary cap that might take out a company, even maybe not what people call a multi-award winner, but a mid-size who won't be there in a couple of years to accept that reach back. Really is a challenge to that innovation. But you're really talking about giving people a belief that something's there and it's worth investing their time and their resources. And that starts with the program people that are running it to know what they have and how they can leverage it. And then they'll go and match it against their program if they need to. But they need to know it's there.
Great. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
All right. So as you might imagine, we have a pretty big list. And to figure out what actually really sits at the top of that list is kind of hard. But one of the things that we often struggle with, we're a fast-moving organization. We like to run fast. So speed is an important element for us. So some of the things we do with our SBIR programs is we don't want to run phase 2s in 24 months. We try to run them in 12, 18 max. And so what we really need help with is speed of funding, speed of contracting, speed of transition, because we want to get technology fielded just as fast as everybody else does. And we need the government's help in doing that. One thing that will also help is if the topics that are released, they're identified by somebody in the DoD, for us, being a defense contractor. Who is that person? Who is that user group? What are their requirements? What is the program office tied to that solicitation? We spend a tremendous amount of time and effort going beyond the labs and engaging user groups, engaging program offices, building those relationships that, oh, by the way, turn over every 2 years. And so you get to start over again. This is not a trivial process to mature and transition technology. For us, the miracles that occur that drive transition sometimes are getting all the right people in the room together to make a decision and create a requirement to procure. So we need the government's help in expediting these processes, bringing the right people together sooner as topics are defined, as needs are defined, and also expediting the contracting and funding cycles so that we can continue to move fast.
Great. I think these are all great suggestions. I think the flexibility in expediting contracting is very much needed. A much better line with respect to how to deal with foreign influence and making sure that companies know how to stay on the bright side of that. Very, very important. I'll add one more, patent protection, and maybe a stipend for companies, especially early companies, to get international protection for their innovative ideas. It's very, very expensive to prosecute. And so thinking about ways that we can help lower that barrier for companies that are doing especially things like defense critical applications. But yeah, I think with that, I think that it takes us to the end. I want to thank the panelists for joining me on this.